Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and with me today is the one, the only Matt Williams, and we're going to be breaking down for you the risky picks. That's right. These are the guys to be concerned with, and maybe they're guys that we still want to invest in anyway, but it's important to have the discussion. How risky are they? Are we willing to bet on success, or are we running as fast as we can in the other direction from them? And Matt Williams and I are going to break it all down for you here today. Of course, you know Matt's work from NBC Sports EDGE and The Athletic, and of course, on the Twitter machine at MattWI77IAMs. That's right. It's Matt Williams. You just, instead of L's, you replace it with the sevens, because Matt Williams doesn't take L's. I've been told that before the show. Matt, it's great to talk to you again. A couple weeks ago, we were chatting over with the pitcher list guys, and here we are coming around for round two with some risky dudes.
Yeah, I know you introduced me as the one and only Matt Williams, but as we were joking beforehand, that is definitely not the case, as there are maybe 1 billion Matt Williams. There's probably another Matt Williams like nearby. You just throw a stone and you could probably hit a Matt Williams. So yeah, I'm happy here to talk a little bit of baseball and talk about some risky players that it's a big thing, especially with everyone thinks there's a doctor out there. There's a lot of misinformation. People don't know how to, who's injury prone, who's not. You got to be willing to, figure out risk. So yeah, we'll talk about some risky players here and what the heck to do with them.
And it's not even just risk. I mean, some guys has just had great performances. What do we think? Do we think they can repeat them? That's always risky. And to be clear, when someone says Matt Williams, what comes to mind for me first as a child of the 80s is, of course, Matt Williams with the San Francisco Giants, third baseman, later with the Diamondbacks. But after that, he's been inactive for years. So you are the last Matt Williams standing in my world. So that's all that matters at the end of the day.
There's 3 primary Matt Williams. Me, Matt Williams of the Giants and in the Diamondbacks. And then the guy who created Home Improvement, apparently at the end, is created, you watch any of those early comedies from the early 90s, created by Matt Williams. There is a troll on Twitter. Doesn't follow me. Don't know how he goes. He'll just occasionally come up to me and post under anything. Will Clark was better than you. Just coming at me like
that's great. I love that.
Clark apparently just got on Twitter today. And the guy came at me. Hey, look, Will Clark's on Twitter now. He's better than you. And it's literally, he'll come up, he'll go months without saying anything. And then he'll just post, Will Clark is better than you. It's fantastic, really.
Yeah, and I may or may not own that account that's trolling you with that. I don't know. We don't know for sure. Maybe we'll find out by the end of the show. Who knows? That's a tease. You got to hang around for it. Before we kick things off today with the risky players, the 10 riskiest that we think going into the 2022 season that are on the board, I want to remind everybody, don't forget about our draft assistant with Sync over at fantasypros.com/draftwizard. If you just saw last week, Eric Cross, the Welsh, and I sat down and did a dynasty mock draft. We were using the draft wizard, but the draft assistant with Sync is amazing because what it does is it syncs up to your league and provides you with pick suggestions. It's basically like having one of us in the room with you in the draft in real time, and it works with Yahoo, ESPN, CBS Sports, basically wherever you're playing, it works. And the interface goes right along with the draft for you. It's very easy to use, and only our MVP and Hall of Fame subscribers have access to it, though. So if you want to make sure that you have that edge, and I know everybody does come draft season, make sure you get that draft assistant with Sync. That is what you need to take your draft game to the next level. Not only the suggestions, too, but the insights that it gives you, too. It tells you if a player is going to last another round, potentially. It tells you when you might want to reach for certain players, too. It also shows you, in those roto leagues where you are in terms of potential standings as you're drafting. It is an incredible piece that you have available to us. So make sure you go ahead and get that. And with that being said, let's kick things off here with you, Maddie, and let's talk about your number 1 riskiest player on your list. And again, this is in no specific order. I just want to be clear about that. But this is the risky picks in terms of Matt's vision. We'll just throw a random one out there for you. So who's number 1 you want to talk about?
Number 1, me and you are both Mets fans, so let's start with Jacob Degrom. Why not? The best pitcher in baseball. It's not up for debate, anybody. There's opinions and there's facts. Jacob Degrom's the best pitcher in baseball is a fact. He is injured, I guess. We never got clarification on that at any point. He would pitch amazing, throwing all no-hit stuff. He'd come out of a game. Everyone thought the season was over. He'd pitch his very next start, and then he would go in, pitch, have no-hit stuff, come out injured. Everyone would think his season is over. He'd pitch the next outing, and then he ended up getting a lot of time off. He came up towards the end. There was rumors that he tore his UCL, and then Sandy Alderson's coming out and saying, "Nah, he's fine." I don't know what to do here. Throwing that fast. I mean, he throws 100-mile-an-hour fastball. Like, they have a list of how many like 100-plus-mile-an-hour fastballs a pitcher has thrown. It's basically Jacob deGrom is like thrown 98% of them, and like Sandy Alcantara is like right below him or something. But if he's pitching, he is the best. Except right now, I mean, how many innings can you expect out of him? 130, 140 would be great. I don't even know if that might be way too high. So you got to gauge how much risk you're willing to bet on something that's kind of unknown, especially now with a lockout. There's no updates of how he looks, how he's doing. So, Jacob deGrom is my number one risky guy because he drops. Sometimes he goes early, and there's someone in a draft that absolutely has no worries. But then sometimes there's, a whole group that are fading him, and you have an opportunity, and you just got to decide whether or not you want to add him to your team or not. So, yeah, deGrom. What are your thoughts on deGrom? Because he's honestly one of the guys I just don't know how to value this year, so I haven't been taking him. So that's usually my thing. If there's too many question marks, I'll usually try to go another direction, but I can't say that it hasn't crossed my mind a few times.
I could not agree more with you when it comes to Jacob deGrom. I don't understand how there's this consensus that he is still a top 5 pitcher. I'm sure in talent he is, but the risk of him actually somehow, or I should say the chances of him actually somehow finishing an entire 30 starts in a season, I just find that really hard to believe. And I hope he does. Believe me, I'm a loser Met fan just like you are. And I think all of us kind of have that feeling as we can't have nice things. I kind of partially blame the lockout on the Mets too. Like, the Mets went out and actually made moves, and now we have a lockout. It's kind of like the bad karma of the Mets. But I'm with you 100% on deGrom. I just don't understand how everybody's so comfortable, and we've heard so little in the offseason too. That's been the most concerning thing to me, is the lack of forthcoming information about Jacob deGrom, where it would make us feel more warm and cozy. And if I was getting him outside of the top 10 pitchers, well, then maybe. But he's still going sometimes 5 or 6 basically on the board.
And not to be a downer, but a lot of people are like, as soon as the lockout's done, there's going to be a flurry of trades and signings. It's going to be so magical. There's going to be a flurry of horrible news on injuries that are finally coming out. And it's going to,
and we started to get some of it already. We got some on Lance McCullers already. So you could throw him into this list, even though we're not going to talk about him today. We're going to throw Josh Young, who obviously he is going to be out for, 6 months or something like that potentially. So, oh my goodness. Here we go. We're already getting all upset about the guys here. All right. Let's talk about the next guy on the list for me. And I know he's on your list too, but I thought I've got to talk about this guy. Maybe I'll throw in an extra one later, but it's Robbie Ray. And Robbie Ray is a risk that I'm willing to take. But I just want to make sure that I'm dialed in with everybody understanding just how big this risk is. Everything that we thought Robbie Ray could be, he was last year. And I got to give credit to one of our listeners who kept messaging me, hey, you should put some money on Robbie Ray for a Cy Young. And I was like, look, it's a good story. I don't think he's going to get there. And then he kept doing it. And the guy was right at the end of the day. And Robbie Ray's always been that guy that the inefficiencies always caught up with him. The walk rate was always too high. The inconsistencies of the home road splits. I remember him tinkering with his mechanics a few years ago too, right on the precipice of potential free agency. And you're going, why are you doing this? What in God's name are you trying to do in a contract year, starting to tinker with some of your mechanics? And then he goes to Toronto, a place where I think all of us go, well, it's the East. This is a tough place to pitch. And he has found himself. Now, he's also found himself at 30. He's also a left-handed pitcher. Sometimes those lefties typically do start to figure it out a little later. I think he has figured it out. I've watched him pitch a lot last year. Trying to watch him pitch, I think that's the thing that kind of makes you a little bit calmer. But there's no doubt there's enormous risk still built in there with Robbie Ray. And if you look at him as far as, the starting pitchers going off the board in ADP, yes, he absolutely could finish as a top 10 starter. He's going at 14 right now, which I think is reasonable. But at the same time, there's that risk that he could absolutely revert to the old guy that we've seen before, Matt, and all of a sudden take your rotation down with it.
No, I am with you. He's a guy that is very risky that I am willing to take a shot on, and I have so far. I do have some early shares. It all depends on how the draft is going. Same as deGrom. There's people that respect what he did. Sometimes you have a whole room that is unwilling to go there, and then boom, you have yourself a discount. The issue I have, the positive is, even if the wheels fall off slightly, the strikeouts are going to be there.
Right.
So that's a nice a nice floor. He may even not be a nice, completely return on your investment, but the strikeouts are there. I mean, he has the highest K per nine in MLB history.
I know.
That's like
It's
a
amazing
fact.
stat, right?
Yeah, when I heard that, I was mind blown. The one red flag I'll throw to people here is it's not like he was bad forever and we were waiting for this season to come. And then it came and they're like, all right, he's a new pitcher. The one thing that I think is not talked about enough is he's done this before.
Right,
Last year,
2017.
Last year, 193 innings, 2.84 ERA, 3.69 FIP. He had a 11.54 K for 9. 2017 in Arizona, 15-5, 162 innings, 2.89 ERA, 12.11 K per 9. I mean, yeah, he's done this before, so nothing. Everyone wants to talk about ceiling his floor. His floor is just as bad as we've ever seen him, and he's no longer in Toronto, where maybe he learned some of those things. I don't believe the people that are like, oh, he's in Seattle now, he's going to stink. You don't forget when you get traded, they don't like Men in Black zap you. You don't lose everything that they've taught you. So yeah, I'm willing to take a shot. There's certain risk there, but it all depends on who's available in the draft and how your draft's going. Everything like that. But there's certain risk here, but there's no injury risk here. So worst case scenario, you're still getting a ton of strikeouts. So I'm willing to take a shot.
Well, I agree with you, and that's why I'm willing to take a shot too, even though he's very risky. Is the strikeouts are good. Where he could potentially hurt you is the whip and ERA again if that starts to come back around. All of a sudden, those inefficiencies start to resurface again. That is basically where it becomes a problem. Mm-hmm. But Seattle, last time I checked, last year was a very competitive baseball team, much to, I think, everyone's surprise. So just because he's going to Seattle doesn't make it a bad thing necessarily. And some of the ballparks he's going to pitch in theoretically are a little bit better and more pitcher friendly, whether it be Oakland, whether it be Seattle itself. So I don't necessarily feel like this is the worst case scenario for Robbie Ray, but I gotta tell you, man, it's surprising to me right now with all that risk too, that both you and I seem like we're willing to take that risk on Robbie Ray. So for me, it's what I saw him do last year. Like, I saw that consistency out of him start after start, which is the thing he never had. And I keep always harping on the same thing about, lefties just take a little longer sometimes. Those guys who throw gas, the left-handed guys, mechanically, it doesn't always fall into place in their 20s. Usually have to wait until their 30s. I remember Al Leiter was a guy that, really didn't hit his stride as a pitcher till he got into his 30s. Another lefty like that. Randy Johnson, obviously. Not that I'm going to compare Robbie Ray to Randy Johnson by any stretch of the means, but still, we have a track record with this over many years of Major League pitching, where the lefties sometimes just late bloomers. Is that part of the configuration for you too, or is it just you saw enough last year where it's coupled with the high K rate, you're willing to take that risk no matter what?
No, I mean, lefties do take a while, and sometimes they're a work in progress even later into their careers. And the thing here is, as long as you're willing to value him correctly, because his ERA was 2.84, his FIP was 3.69, his xERA was 3.60, and basically why the big difference there, besides, usually people think field independent pitching has to do with fielding. He had a 90.1% left on base percentage. For everyone that knows what the average is, it's not 90. His career average is usually like between 70 and 80. So expect that to go back to normal. His BABIP against was 268. It was 267 in 2017 by the way, but for him, it's usually in the 300s, 310s. So assume both those go back to normal. I think that maybe you can get an ERA closer to his FIP, which is like 3.5, 3.6. And that's where most projections have him this year. As long as you're willing to buy into that's what he is. He's all the strikeouts at a 3.5 ERA. I believe he made enough changes last year. We can expect maybe a little better because the walks were always a huge problem for him. And he did give us the best mark of his entire career last year, 2.42. The years before that, 7.8, 4.3, 5.09. So if he fixed the walks, he's still giving you the strikeouts. I think there's plenty enough here where he's, I think, closer to the pitcher we saw last year than the disaster that we've seen before. So I think even with the regression, I do like the floor. I think we recognize his actual floor could be bad, but I think his realistic floor is not as scary as some make it out to be. So yeah, that's why I saw enough last year where I think he did make actual changes. Yeah, I think he's closer. He's not Cy Young. Blake Snell, he won a Cy Young, but he had a lot of these other peripherals in his way too. To win a Cy Young, you need to be good and you need to be lucky. And that's what happened to that's what happened to Ray last year. So I think he's not this good, but he's still very good.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to let's do another pitcher here too, because I know you had two pitchers on your list, Degrom and Robbie Ray. We both had.
Yep.
So I'm gonna throw another one of mine at you, and I want to get your thoughts on Carlos Rodon because this was a pitcher who had all of the markings, college pitcher, a guy that was very polished coming into the major leagues. Top pick overall by the White Sox there a few years ago, and we were always waiting and waiting and waiting and spinning our wheels with Carlos Rodon. Then all of a sudden last year, a good spring training, a dominant first half. The guy was unbelievable. And then we started to see, obviously, a little bit of wear and tear as the season went on. Rodon's ability to complete a season is well known, or I should say inability to complete a season is well known. And now we're at a crossroads with him. We don't have a team for him. We don't know if this is the one bright shining moment of Carlos Rodon. It's a huge risk. And at this point, to me, this is a risk that I am not willing to take. So if I'm in on Robbie Ray, I'm out on Carlos Rodon, no matter where he goes. He's the 33rd pitcher off the board. He's going in that same area as Shane McClanahan, guys like Justin Verlander. And if you want to look up this ADP, the consensus ADP is over right now on FantasyPros.com. But for me, as great as last season was, and I was a guy telling everybody, hey, with your last couple picks, make sure you grab Carlos Rodon just in case. And I was somebody who did it in a lot of leagues myself. I am out this year. I can't possibly go down this road again with him. 133 innings, 13-5 last year, 185 Ks, a 2.37 ERA, a .96 WHIP. There's every reason to be optimistic, yet I'm pessimistic. So I want to get your thoughts here. Matt Williams, what do you think about Carlos Rodon?
Not to bore the audience with a 3-for-3 agreement here, but I do agree with you. I'm out on Carlos Rodon. There's a lot of rumors the Mets may get in and other teams. I mean, we already have.
Well, then I'm definitely out.
Yeah, we have Carlos Carrasco and Jacob Degrom. I really don't need that to be happening. I mean, Rodon was amazing. I mean, inning for inning, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball. It's just, I mean, he has the history of wearing down, and he did this year. He only came out with 132 innings. I think if you draft him, you'd be lucky to get over 100. But there's a lot of question marks there as well. The big problem for me is he did finish the season. He was injured towards the end, and they brought him back as he wasn't quite the same. And then the capital off the White Sox, who need a starting pitcher, didn't even give him a qualifying offer. Huge red flag. It's $18 million for one of the best pitchers in baseball. If you thought he was healthy enough to give you at least one more year, you offer him that. Even if he leaves, you get a draft pick back. So they didn't offer to him because they were worried he'd accept it. They didn't want one of the best pitchers in baseball back on a 1-year deal. If they don't believe in him, why should I? So, yeah, that's actually, I mean, you talk about statistics and narratives. This is a narrative, but I think it's a strong one. Yeah, if the White Sox went through their whole due diligence, they watched like closer than anyone how great he was, and they're like, no thanks. Yeah, I'm also with them. I agree with the White Sox, I guess.
Well, I guess the counter argument is the White Sox had such an investment, they never got it back, that they're kind of that scorned lover, right? They're the ones that have been with him this whole time, and they think to themselves, well, it can't get any better than this. Why would we torture ourselves? And I assume that some other team is going to say, well, look at what he did last year. And a lot of fantasy owners are going to say that too. They're going to look at it and say, hey, look at what he did last year. This is what he was supposed to be anyway. He had the pedigree. He just never was able to do it at the major league level, and certainly never able to stay healthy enough to do it too. And that's the thing, as great as last season was, it was still 133 innings. I mean, do we really think he's going to throw 160, 170 this year? I think that's a hard no for me. And if forced to it, I'll ask you this question too. If you had to choose on the board between him and Justin Verlander coming off Tommy John, who would you pick?
I want neither, by the way. I would. God, Verlander. I mean, people talk about
last time we saw Verlander, he struck out 300 guys. I just want to point that out.
No. I know nothing against what he can do. It's just people talk about him coming out from Tommy John, but people forget he was injured before that. He's been gone for over 2 years. Before that, he had core surgery, so he was coming off of a bad injury. And then he came back and got injured again. So it's like, it's such a layover for a guy at his age.
Well, look how good the layover was for Buster Posey last year. We had a little 2020 layover. All of a sudden, he was like a new man in 2021. Maybe Justin Verlander just needed a break.
So, I mean, long story short, I will go with Justin Verlander because I really do not believe in Rodon. Verlander, if he did it, would shock me. If he pitched a full season, Cy Young worthy, I'd be like, huh. but I wouldn't be shocked because it's Justin Verlander. He's Superman. But yeah, if Carlos Rodon pitched over 150 innings, I would be stunned. So yeah, I'll go with Verlander.
If there's a prop for that somewhere where I could take the under, I don't even know what. Like if you said it 100, I would probably still take the under without a doubt. I mean, I'd be very confident in that wager. Maybe go see if that's available somewhere. But since we kind of cheated there, we both picked Robbie Ray. Is there another pitcher that you feel passionately about that you think is a risk, that you think is somebody? I mean, it could be a Bieber, it could be a Flaherty. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there in the top tier of pitching that could potentially be that. So is there one that really sticks out to you? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but that's why you're Matt Williams with 2 sevens.
There's a couple of interesting people. Flaherty, I don't really want to talk about. Zach Gallen had the weird injury that was more of a broken bone. How about Pablo Lopez?
Let's talk about Pablo Lopez.
I love Pablo Lopez. I wrote one of my threads on him, and he DM'd me separately to tell me how much he loved it. And I told him to throw his changeup more, and he did. I probably had nothing to do with that, but he talked to me before he did it, so I'm taking like 2% of the credit. That being said, he's coming off multiple seasons with shoulder problems, so he's just not going late enough. His ADP right now is 134, going around like right around Carlos Rodon, but right around Tyler Mahle, Nate Eovaldi, Eduardo Rodriguez, Chris Bassett. There's a lot of interesting names around there. It's just when Pablo's on, he's good, but it seems almost like a guarantee at this point he's going to run into shoulder problems. So as much as I like him, he's one of my favorite pitchers. He'd have to fall so late that I think he's kind of off my board. I don't cross too many people off my board, but he actually seems like a sure thing to get injured because shoulders are not something that just kind of go away, especially for a young pitcher. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, he's just so good that even if you actually were able to get even 130 innings out of him, his ADP may be worth it, but something could go wrong in spring training, trying to rush things because of the lockout, and he could get hurt from the get-go. So yeah, Pablo Lopez is a real risky guy that's going way too early. I think people just don't truly understand the likelihood of him getting through a season is so small.
I think maybe you risk it in a season-long roto, but in any head-to-head categories or points, I think it's just, like you said, too much of a risk at the current ADP of where he's going. All right, so we gave you 4 pitchers. We gave you Degrom, Lopez, Ray, and Rodon. Let's get some hitters on the board here. I'm going to throw one at you here. It's Cedric Mullins, which breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. I wrote about this yesterday. We had a column going out about outfielders in the top 25 that you're a little concerned with. Cedric Mullins, a baseball player, is everything I want in a baseball player. I love the way he plays the game. I love the effort level. I love the power-speed combination that he brings. I think Cedric Mullins, if more people took to the game and the approach that Cedric Mullins has, the game would be better. My concern is this. 22 of the home runs last year came at home. We're going to have some adjustments to the ballpark. Now, again, not all of them necessarily went to left field or right field, but still, he is a hitter who can spread the ball around. I appreciate that about Cedric Mullins, but at the same time, you have to figure he's going to take some kind of hit in the power department. It's also just built into his minor league career too. The slugging percentage was not over 500 in the minor league career. It was in the low to mid 4s if memory serves here. So this is a player already who, yes, has some pop in the bat, but at the same time, I think he's more of a 15-30 player than a 30-30 kind of player. And he's being drafted like a 30-30 player most of the time. And I think that that's a little bit concerning for me. I think it's a risk. Now, can he buck that trend? I think if anybody can, it's that guy. And I will take Cedric Mullins in the right spot. My problem is in terms of ADP right now, I don't think I'm getting enough of a discount for that one glorious season. Right now, in terms of outfielders over on FantasyPros, if you look at where Cedric Mullins is going, he's still in that, top 25 tier. In fact, he's top 20. He's 14 overall in terms of outfielders going off the board, so top 15. And right around there, you got guys like George Springer, who's also a huge risk. Maybe we'll talk about him later, too. I mean, there's a lot of risk built into some of these guys, but there's also a higher power floor for some of them, too. And I think that is where I struggle with where he is compared to his peers in that same tier. So for me, Cedric Mullins is a bit of a risk that I'm scared to take. I might take if I get a discount, but I haven't seen that discount yet. What are your thoughts on Cedric Mullins, Matt?
I do love Mullins for all the same reasons you were saying. I think he did hit above his head on the power department, similar to what you're saying. Luckily, he's a left-hander, so he doesn't have to worry about the, they moved back the
They moved back to left field, right, yeah.
Yeah, 1.5 million feet, whatever it was. But he's going to have a decent average. I mean, he was 291. His expected was 272. He does hit the ball to all fields. Maybe him going opposite field could actually help in the batting average. Maybe he gets some more triples out of it. In points leagues, maybe this is a interesting one, even though speed isn't as big a deal there. But power wise, he has below a 10% barrel rate. Nothing crazy. I think. Where'd you say you expect him to be power wise? Dropping from 30 to like
I think
15.
15. I think 15 and 30 is still a really good fantasy player. But is he a top 15 outfielder? Is a 15-30 guy?
No, I
I
think
don't think so.
he's more. I think he's more. I'd have him more in like the 20 home run range. But still, for how early he's going, you can get guys a little similar later. There's a lot of risk to be had in a guy like Tyler O'Neill, but I do believe in his ability to turn into 30-30 season, maybe more than Mullins at this point again, just because I believe in the power a little more. But yeah, it does seem a bit early because I mean, let's just say his batting average falls to like that was in previous seasons. Again, I believe that he did turn a corner, so we don't want to regress him too far here.
No, and look, Matt. Look, let's not forget about Whit Merrifield, right? A guy who did not
Yeah,
have a great minor league track record, figured it out basically right before he got to the major league level, and then never stopped. So I want to
yeah,
give him some credit. Like that's actually possible. But at the same time, I'm looking at this Orioles team. I'm looking at the track record of the minor leagues. Do I want to bet on it? And I think to invest in it becomes potentially tricky, and I think it's a risk.
yeah. I mean, like, let's just say he bats 270. Robbie Grossman's probably going to turn in a season of like batting 240, 245.
Mm-hmm.
He'll give you 15 to 20 home runs. He'll give you 15 to 20 stolen bases. So if you're regressing down Cedric Mullins, again, he has a ceiling that Grossman does not. I'm not trying to say they're even players, but is he worth taking that early versus, again, and this is not an either, draft him, not that situation. Robbie Grossman is kind of a go-to later guy bring up just because he happens to do so many different things. So yeah, I agree. It seems like where he's being drafted, he's required to do what he just did. So yeah, I think we both like him. He's just being drafted too early. That's all.
Yeah. All right. Give me another hitter on your list here that you want to talk about that you think might be a risky pick.
Jazz Chisholm. Let's talk about Jazz Chisholm. Most people love him. He's a maniac. He looks incredibly exciting out there. He has a big smile on his face. And I believe I brought this up on your show before, so I'm going to say it again. The Kit Keller of fantasy baseball, he just loves the high ones. They show that replay of him hitting that Jacob Degrom home run. Just a terrible decision to swing at that pitch. That's actually one of his worst problems. He has such a high strikeout rate because he swings at those. He doesn't have a high success rate at swinging at those. If when you do it, it is majestic, and they do look like meatballs to the hitters coming in. Although I don't know how you see a 100-mile-an-hour fastball coming up that fast, but brutal plate discipline metrics. We know about the power and the speed. I think from a dynasty standpoint, you're just hoping he makes incremental improvements this year. His floor is being sent back to the minors. That's how bad it can get for him.
Wow.
when pitchers adjust to him. There's players that can overcome bad plate discipline. Javier Baez, Adalberto Mondesi, when he's healthy, he actually carries a decent average for a guy who's just atrocious hitter. Another good example though is Victor Robles. Was it 2018, 2019? He almost turned in like a 20-30 season, and he was one of the worst hitters in baseball. Now look at him. That's what we could be looking at Jazz Chisholm. So if you are Chisholm, I don't know how to say his name. I need to learn that. So if you're taking a risk that early, just go another direction. There's a lot of other people there. Take like, take a. I'm trying to think of any like a.
Well, look, Chisholm right now, in terms of like his market value, and so much of this, is tied to the steals. Obviously, the tantalizing steals category that everybody is woefully behind him because people aren't stealing bases much. He's the second baseman number 11 off the board, and Jonathan India right now is 12. I'd rather have Jonathan India, and it's not close for me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would like to take him. I'd rather have Polanco. I'd rather have Brandon Lau. I'd rather have Jose Altuve. And a lot of these guys aren't stealing bases, but again.
But like you said, you're almost in a spot where you're sacrificing the potential. The downside is this guy gets sent back to the minor leagues for one category you're chasing, and I think that's nuts.
I think here's the thing. I think I brought this up somewhere before, but I believe this. If you're a risk taker, don't do it this early, especially with a guy whose floor is, again, the minor leagues. I always make fun of how much people are making out of O'Neal Cruz and how he's being drafted based on one batted ball event. He hit a ball 119 miles an hour and was great. And I like him. He's going to be awesome. in the future. But he struck out 40% of the time upon his promotion. He's like 9 feet tall. He's going to have a lot of holes in his swings. He may not start on the opening day roster. We'll see what the CBA has to do with having the Pirates do it, because he only had a few at bats in AAA. So this more was a cup of coffee. But if for some reason he worked his way onto the roster, give me him over Jazz, because I project them to do about the same, struggle about the same, except one's going astronomically later in drafts. So that kind of gives you an idea of what I expect Jazz to do this year and how much risk I think there is.
Anyo Cruz right now, consensus ADP on FantasyPros 234. So a bit different than the 88 attached to Jazz Chisholm. Just and you're 100% right. Like, risk is all about not only the eye of the beholder, but also the eye of the ADP. Where this player's going and how much do you have to risk to find out. It's the same premise of last year's Carlos Rodon versus this year's Carlos Rodon. He is the poster child for it, where on this very program, over and over, I was hammering Carlos Rodon and Mitch Haniger. Free squares, and if they're good, man, what a difference it's going to make for your team. And if they're bad, you can cut them in a couple weeks. It's okay. That's the kind of guy you want. It's hard to, a top 100 player selected off the board in Chisholm, to cut that guy. That becomes a very difficult thing because you made that investment. All right, let's go to another guy.
Real quick, you were saying
sure.
all the other guys we'd rather have: India, Polanco, Lau, Altuve. Take one of them, and then later in the draft, take Robbie Grossman. The ultimate Band-Aid.
Right.
He will give you power and speed and kind of a bad batting average.
That's all you need. Every team needs a good Robbie Grossman on it. All right. Next for me on my risky list is a big name. It is Christian Yelich. And Christian Yelich is a player we've seen can be the best player in baseball, and we've seen the last 2 seasons. I understand we want to give him a pass in 2020 with the back, but 2021, apparently, at least the second half of the year, we were told the back is not an issue. Well, I think the batting average is an issue. I think the stats and the power, or the zapping of the power, is a huge issue. And what's so perplexing about Christian Yelich is this was a player that I don't think anybody projected to become this massive power hitter. And I was incredibly skeptical a couple years ago when he landed in Milwaukee. The run he went on when he hit 22 home runs in 2 months, I thought, man, this is not sustainable. I can't do this. And then he absolutely embarrassed me the next year by basically having a better season. And I thought, well, okay, I have to eat it. Christian Yelich is awesome. Then some injuries, and now we're in a weird dividing line here with him, because Christian Yelich is a player of a very high ceiling, but also the floor is extraordinarily low. Now, you are getting a discount on him, which is good. He is going as the 24th outfielder overall, pick number 81, but he's also going around guys like Stanton, Chris Bryant, JD Martinez. JD Martinez is outfielder number 23. Christian Yelich is 24. I'm sorry, like, in terms of me building a roster right now, I can't get there. I can't get to a place where I'm going to say, yep, I'm going to go ahead and buy into Christian Yelich, even though JD Martinez is older, even though JD Martinez has been around a while. I don't care. Until I see a healthy Christian Yelich back on a field hitting baseballs with authority, I can't invest in him. Now, Matt Williams, what do you think about Christian Yelich? Because this, I'm sure, is a player that in certain circles, some people love him, some people hate him. Where do you fall?
I don't know what people are expecting to get from him, because one thing that was built into a lot of his price when he was, at his heyday a few years ago, was speed. He stole 9 last year. He got caught 3 times. Projections have him going anywhere between 13 and 19. I don't even know how you can have him get it. How do you get him up to 19? I don't get it. But that's just the speed part of it. Break it down into his plate discipline. It hasn't gone anywhere. I drafted him last year in Tout Wars because it was an OBP league. Luckily, that didn't hurt me much. He still had a 362 clip. I was hoping for better. He's usually a little higher than that. But again, that's not bad. But again, only 9 home runs, 9 stolen bases overall. If his back is healthy, I would be intrigued, because it's not like he was just the bad back was sapping him the whole year. Maybe it hurt him early on, and then he was just trying to work his way back. Because if you look at things like his launch angle and his the standard deviation between the high and low of his launch angle, it kind of looks like he was early in his career hitting all those ground balls. It was like 2.8 degrees, the launch angle, whereas a couple years ago it was 11.5. His fly ball rate has gone the last 3 years from 35.9 down to 29.8, and then last year 23.7. He's just not elevating the ball. And line drives are kind of what makes, the BABIP go. He still has his speed. So there's plenty of reasons to think maybe another full off season to work on things. that he can get back to where he was if he's fully healthy and his back is fine. So would I be shocked if he bounced back to what he was? Yes. But I do expect him to be a lot closer to, let's say 2017. 2017.
Pre-Milwaukee.
Yeah, pre-Milwaukee. Yeah, in Milwaukee, he went there, batted 326 with 36 home runs, 22 stolen bases his first year. The year before he left Miami, he batted 282 with 18 home runs, 100 runs, 81 RBI, 16 stolen bases. I think that if he is healthy, I would draft him expecting that, and I think his draft price is perfectly fine for that. I don't have any shares now, but I'm not as afraid as I would be for other people. I think that there is something here because, again, the plate discipline's intact. He still had some crazy max exit velocity. There's just something mechanically wrong, and it probably has to do with him overcompensating for his back. So if we get
Right.
reports healthy, I'd be in. But we, lockout, we don't know.
That's what concerns me too, is whenever you're overcompensating for one injury, something else ends up getting hurt. And we've seen that time and time again. And here's another thing too that's really just mind-blowing to me. His career batting average against left-handed pitching, 276, 789 OPS. That's pretty respectable, right? Last year, you want to take a guess what that number was? I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but it was not great.
Well, I already have it up in front of me, so I don't want to cheat.
Okay, so why don't you tell the kids at home what it is? It's 187.
Good Christian Yelich. 187, not too bad. With his 67 weighted runs created plus, making him roughly 35% worse than the league average.
And that's, I think, where I come by. I think you're right. I think we would all sign up for Christian Yelich that you're describing from the Marlins. Give me 18 home runs, 15 steals, give me a nice batting average, okay. But the problem is that I'm missing out on JD Martinez to do it. I can't get there. And the biggest thing, too, and I love when we do this on the show, too, and this is why, we're on Fantasy Pros, we have the consensus. You can see all the different ADPs from the different places. The consensus ADP we're talking about when it comes to this player, when we're talking about Christian Yelich, is 81. In NFBC, where people are making money investments, like real serious, not casual, like, oh, let's all get our friends together and play a Yahoo League. 103rd overall. So that's a pretty big difference. I think that's a lot of people telling you, hey, there's a lot of risk here, and people who are making serious money investments are making it, so maybe you should think twice about it too. All right, let's go to another guy on your list here, Matt Williams. Who you got?
My next hitter is going to be Bobby Whitt Jr.
Be still my heart. Please don't be too tough on Bobby.
I'm not being tough. I'm not being tough on Bobby. I love Bobby Witt. I love Wander Franco. I love these guys. I don't draft rookies very often. I love Wander a lot because I think his floor is so amazingly high.
Me too.
I think he's Xander Bogaerts like this season. Bobby Witt Jr., the thing that's amazing with him is I think that he could struggle and still be an amazing fantasy player. We talked about some of them earlier. If he struggles at all, I still think he turns in power and speed. I'm a little skeptical to pay for him to be a backbone of any of my squads, especially if you're someone who's not in a lot of leagues, just because I'm not sure what Kansas City has in mind. He obviously should be on their opening day roster, and they, as a team, haven't been too shy about bringing up their young talent early, especially their pitching. So I would bet on him coming up very soon, if not opening day. So I could get on board there. For me, though, I have been doing NFBC leagues, so this is a little bit of blinders. You got to, it's all draft by draft. There's always one person that is very excited about this guy. Maybe it's Joe. And
it might be. Spoiler.
He always goes a little earlier than maybe I'm willing to take him. But yes, I am worried because, look at what happened with Jared Kelenic. There's no such thing as a sure thing. It's tough to invest in something you're not sure about, and it could go sideways. But he's going a little late enough where it may not completely kill you. So he's a risk I'd be willing to take a shot on. I haven't found the right fit for me yet, but I do love Bobby Witt Jr. He is his ceiling is like he could be a third round player as early as next season.
Well, I keep calling him David Wright. Like that's who it reminds me of when I watch him play. Like young David Wright. People forget that he used to steal a lot of bases.
A lot of bases. Yeah.
David Wright was like a 30-30 kind of guy when he first came up into the big leagues. This was a real huge talent. And I also like that he used the opposite field. Like when you watch Bobby Witt hit, like to me, it's that similar kind of swing path and similar kind of player. And what's so fascinating, this is the inverse of the Christian Yelich conversation. The average ADP and the consensus for Bobby Witt on Fantasy Pros is 102, In NFBC, it's 91. So that's clearly the Joe Pisapia round ahead of taking Bobby Witt. And yeah, of course there's risk.
Well, main event leagues in the NFBC are notoriously known for not going by ADP at all. If this guy, by the end of spring training, hopefully we get that soon, it looks like he's going to make the opening day roster. This guy's going in the third, fourth round, like in drafts for sure. I think the main event, someone will jump him super early. If he's killing the ball in spring training and they announce him, there'll be one. All it takes is one guy.
If you're doing early drafts, like any best ball kind of things, I think Bobby Witt is a great selection here at the ADP you're getting him. Like that. And it's funny because Jazz Chisholm going ahead of him right now. And that is, as you said, a tough sell. At least if you're going to invest and take a chance in this range, take a chance in the hitter that's shown you in the minor league track record. Man, oh man, this guy can put the bat on the ball consistently. And maybe not everything translates, but maybe you get at least the power and speed, like you're saying, instead of the batting average.
If you told me I wasn't getting Witt until mid-May, I'd still take him over Jazz.
That's fair. You know what? I agree. But there is risk, and I'm glad you're bringing it up, because as much excitement as I have for Bobby Witt Jr., you're 100% right. There's always these guys, the rookies
each other on the bus. Jazz will be going back to AAA, and Bobby will be coming back up.
But we have to do that. We have to temper our expectations of rookies, because we've been let down plenty of times, and those players end up having great careers too. You know, not everybody's Juan Soto that comes up and just becomes Juan Soto. All right, let's see, whose turn is it? Oh, it's mine again. Look at that. Here's another guy from Christmas past. You ready for this one? Cody Bellinger. I gotta look, and there's some big names on this list today. I mean, Jacob Degrom. If I told you 3 years ago we'd be sitting here doing a show about Christian Yelich, Jacob Degrom, and Cody Bellinger being the riskiest picks in baseball, I think we'd all be saying, you're nuts, you're crazy. Yeah. These guys are all locks.
We want the safety of Robbie Ray instead.
Right. Would much rather have the safety of Robbie Ray. But I'm looking at Cody Bellinger, and I was a big defender of him after things went south for him. After that glorious season where he came up and just, you know, tore the cover off the ball. We all thought, here we go. Here's another great player in the annals of Dodger lore, and Cody Bellinger is going to be this guy and who's going to carry this offense for years and years. And I think we got to a place where then everybody started getting off the bandwagon. And I thought that was a little too early. You know, this is a young player. We have the classic sophomore slump. Let's give this guy a little bit of a break, right? And now we're at a point where I'm starting to wonder was that the anomaly? And that is a terrible place to be. And in all fairness to Cody Bellinger, he is not that old. I understand that. But when you are coming off a season where you played 94 games and hit a $166, I really don't care what you did in the playoffs. Like, I don't care. Yeah, okay, you had a nice run in the playoffs. Good. That's like a week. Like, that's not enough to make me feel super warm and fuzzy about buying back in. And I think that's where I'm at. So it is a very tough situation here. A guy in 2017 is 39 home runs. 2018 he struggles, starts to bounce back a little bit in the second half. 2019, 47 home runs, and then 2020, which, again, I understand 2020 with the stoppage and everything and the COVID, everybody was all thrown off, okay, but last year, I don't know, last year was a little bit, 94 games is a big sample where I'm a little concerned. So I guess the point is, I'm willing to take a shot on Cody Bellinger, but I think I've got to have a team where I feel really good about what I've built already. If I feel good about the foundation and the core roster I've constructed, and I want to take a risk on a guy like a Corey Seager or a Cody Bellinger who have this massive upside, okay, I will. But if you've already got a couple picks where you're like, well, this guy could go south, and this guy could go south, but let me take Cody Bellinger anyway, I think that's a recipe for disaster personally. And currently, Cody Bellinger is going as the 27th outfielder overall, going in that same range actually as Brian Reynolds, who I look at as one of the safest investments in fantasy baseball that I could make. So I'll put it to you. Would you rather have the glorious upside, the potential Cody Bellinger, or my goodness, Brian Reynolds just gets done every single night? Who would you rather have on your roster this year?
Then Brian Reynolds or Cody Bellinger?
Yeah.
Oh, Brian Reynolds 100 times out of 100.
See, you and I once again on the same. I like when the analysts are on the same page, and I'll tell you why. I think it tells the people that there's a confidence level that, yeah, this is not just like all of us, sheep coming together. No. We've all done our homework. We've come together to the table today, and we've said these are the feelings we have about certain players. And I think that's important when we all come to the same consensus.
Yeah. As far as Cody Bellinger, his StatCast page looks like a blueberry Slurpee. It's not good. I mean, he's still got some speed, But I mean, in his MVP season, during his MVP season, he started to struggle so bad that he changed his swing coming off of an MVP season. That's how bad, like, things turned in after that. And then of course in 2020 bats 239. And then everyone's like, oh, he's coming off a bad year. He looks so good in the playoffs. He's not coming off a bad year. He batted 165. That's not a bad year. That's a why are you in the majors year.
Right.
So, I mean, I know he got stomped in the ankle early in the year, and that wasn't very good. And he looked good in the playoffs. And that's actually been enough for some people to be like, oh, he looks back to normal, but I mean, it's just in the playoffs. I can't overlook it. Good luck to him. Seems like a nice and confused fellow. I think that if he's going to bounce back, he's going to do it on someone else's team. It's just, I look at data. That's what I do. And literally there's not a redeeming quality to be found with this guy. He was an MVP guy who changed his entire approach, and that approach has been just super terrible. So unless I read a newspaper article where Cody's like, you know what? I'm going to go back to doing in 2019 when I hit 305 with 47 home runs.
Yeah, man.
Maybe I'll consider it. But for now, again, blueberry Slurpee. No, thank you.
Blueberry. Now, every time I see Cody Bellinger in that Dodger uniform, that's all I'm going to think about. He's a walking blueberry.
I'm going to create a meme of that thing of him gawking off into the universe, and I'm going to put a blueberry Slurpee in his hand.
And here's another one, too. Consensus ADP, right? 87 overall. Brian Reynolds, 93. But in NFBC, Brian Reynolds is 92. Cody Bellinger's 98. See? The smart people like you and me are like, no, give me Brian Reynolds. I know what I'm getting there. I don't know what I'm getting with Cody Bellinger. And that's a point in the draft, too, in the top 100 picks, where I still need to build the core that I feel good about. When we get outside of 100, 150, then I'm a little bit more, all right, let's wild west this bad boy and see what happens. But in this top 100 picks, man, I want to make sure I'm getting guys that I can depend on. And as tantalizing as the ceiling is, my goodness, I can't get past that Route 166 batting average. I mean, that's just bad news, baby. All right, let's go for another one of your guys here. Who is your last hitter on your list here to close things out?
All right, the Riddler, Max Muncie. No one knows what's wrong with him.
Maybe he and Jacob Degrom have the same doctor.
He gets injured in the playoffs. They say he'll be back. He doesn't come back until he gets interviewed midway through the offseason near the holidays, where he announces, oh, everything's going very poorly and I'm not progressing at all. That's basically the last official stance, until there was a picture of someone showing him arriving in his truck going, oh, Max Muncie's showing up to work out. And everyone's like, he must be good. Like, what does that mean? I don't know a thing. I've seen reports that say he could be back opening day. I've seen reports that said he may not be back until after the All-Star break. How am I supposed to draft him? I can't. So, I mean, we're talking about question marks here. It's just, there's literally less information on Max Muncie than there is on, like, the UFO landings in Area 51. So Max Muncie, I don't know. If you're drafting him, you're doing it blindly. I mean, he could be a zero. I do have one share because I completely whiffed on first base in a draft and hold, but I got him somewhere in a sharp room, like 200 picks after his maximum ADP slot. So I'm like, all right, I'll take a shot here. But I felt terrible about it even then. So yeah, Max Muncie, I can't, it's tough.
I'm with you, man. I can't do it either. So once again, I mean, it's fun to debate, but I think it's more important in this particular topic today about risky players to kind of be on the same page, because I think it's way more helpful for some of the audience out there as they approach their drafts. And here's another one too. Max Muncie's going as the 14th second baseman off the board, pick 109 overall in the FantasyPros consensus. In NFBC, 146. Now, if you start to bounce out to the 146 range, it's guys like Ty France, Brendan Rodgers, Ryan McMahon. I got to be honest with you, Matty, I think I'd still take all of those guys over Max Muncie with this curious injury we're dealing with.
Absolutely. I mean, all he has to do is miss 1 month. And how much better is he than France or McCann? He doesn't have to miss the entire amount. I mean, a large chunk of those counting stats is a big deal. Again, it's different in Roto, where you're adding everything up, versus points where you can just kind of weather the storm and add someone else in. Obviously you're not taking a zero, you're adding in a replacement level player, but it doesn't take too long for some of those other guys to catch up. And again, you don't know if he'll re-injure himself, if he'll be the same upon coming back immediately, if he's going to have to start. on the injured list to build up strength and then do an extended spring training. There's like all sorts of stuff that can go wrong here.
Yeah. All right. Let's recap some of these names here. You had Jazz Chisholm, Bobby Whitt Jr., and Max Muncie. I had Cedric Mullins, Christian Yelich, and Cody Bellinger. Those are the hitters that we think are very risky. Matt Williams, while I've got you, I want to pick your brain because you're a draft master after all. And I want to get your opinions on some things going on right now. The first one being the pitcher pool this year. I've been very steadfast about my approach, which is the top of the elite tier, basically, those top 10 guys. I find a lot of red flags with every single one of them, basically, in some fashion. So I'm going to that next tier typically, and I'm doubling up. I'm trying to find two pitchers that I really like because I think that's a better value, and I'm getting my offense. But how do you see the elite pitcher pool this year? Are you somebody that is targeting one of these top 10 guys early in your drafts, or are you trying to more build a rotation out of bodies?
I love the top tier. If I'm at like the second or third round turn, like I pick near the 1, 2, 3 picks to start the draft. If a player I like a Zach Wheeler falls, which they have on occasion, I'll go there. But even a guy like a Brandon Woodruff, the DH is coming. You don't know how much of a step back he'll come. He might be a lot closer to the pack than people think. Again, I love Brandon Woodruff, but I may take a shot on Wheeler, or if a guy like Lucas Giolito falls even further into the third. He's not really considered in that top tier, but overall, I kind of I love the middle pack, and I mean,
the Freddie Peralta group, as I call them, like that. That's the group of pitchers that are very exciting to me this year.
Well, there's that's kind of right. Well, there's Max Fried and there's the Freddie Peralta, like you said, but even right behind them, there's the Joe Musgrove and the Frankie Montas, and like there's so
Robbie Ray,
Robbie Ray, Jose Barrios. There's a lot of pitchers, and then behind there you get the disrespected guys like what's his name? I gave Charlie Morton. He's so disrespected I couldn't think of him. There's a large chunk of things of pitchers that are very acceptable that I'd love to even triple tap in that area if necessary. So yeah, I think overall, unless someone falls to you really like. To a value where you're like, okay, I like this right here. It's better to kind of pound hitters and just feast in that middle, because it's not like you're passing on pitching. You're like, okay, I need to take so-and-so here. Like I got to get freed. If you don't get freed, there's plenty of other really good options. So it's a good way to build. But
I agree with you too.
After that, there is a big teardrop after that though. Where the question mark
100%. Let's talk about that. Let's twofold. I agree with you, number one, about what you just said, because in the Raz Slam yesterday, Walker Buehler was still sitting. I was the number 2 pick, and he made it all the way back to me at the turn. I'm like, well, this is just dumb. I'm going to take Walker Buehler here, even though I'm not somebody who's reaching for pitching. This is why you have to be flexible in every single draft, right? But I'm with you. I want to hammer that group that we talked about, that cluster of that 1A starter cluster that seems to be very beneficial. But after that, there's a drop-off in that group that I think is terrifying. Like, you can go through the Musgrove, Montas, Manoah, Morton, the M&M boys, as I like to call them, all the way down to Trevor Rogers. And then after Trevor Rogers, we start to talk about Carlos Rodon and Pablo Lopez. I am terrified of this group of starting pitchers, and this, to me, is where it just falls off the map completely, where I don't want to take another pitcher for like 5 rounds, basically.
There's plenty of good ones, except the question marks really mount up, whether they just don't have the ace upside you're hoping they can return, or there's some kind of injury like Tyler Mahle. I love him. Bad ballpark. It'd be great if he got traded, but I think he doesn't have the ace upside. Nathan Eovaldi, if he's healthy, he's undervalued, but he has those health issues he's always had in the background. But then you have the Pablo Lopez, Shane Baz. Who knows what Tampa Bay does with the innings with him? I don't trust that at all. Framber Valdez, he gave up his strikeouts last year. Sean Manaea was great, but of course we know about his shoulder injuries. There's just, it's a cluster. I mean, there's interesting guys like Eduardo Rodriguez. I love him. Everyone's like, he's a darling of StatCast people that think that his peripherals, he'll take a big step up, and he's moved to Detroit, which is a great ballpark. I like drafting him, but it's certainly not a guarantee. I always thought he was like a poor man's Aaron Nola when he was doing really well.
Music to my ears. I've always been an Erod guy, and every year I've got him on my team because it was that same mindset with Robbie Ray. I was like, well, at least I'm getting strikeouts. I know I'm getting those, and if he ever takes that next step, this could be a really good pitcher. And, ironically, he takes a hit in Detroit, I think, from the perspective of the casual fan, right? Well, Detroit's a bad team, so I don't want any part of him. But you make a good point for the ballpark factor, too. Moving, from the east to the central, that might be a better move, potentially. Some better ballparks there. What about closers? What's your approach on that this year?
It depends on your format. Right now, we don't know many people that have a job
Right.
So in draft and hold formats, there is no waivers. You cannot fix not having a closer. So therefore, you got to grab one with a job early. Early ADP, you have guys going. You have like Hader and Hendricks going in the second or early third, and then Diaz, Presley, Clase, Chapman. They're all kind of going in a bunch, and then right after that, the Romano Gallegos, Will Smiths of the world go, and like by round 8, poof, gone. I think you have to make the jump and take one. I've ended up without a Kenley Jansen because I think he can be just as good as most of those guys, but he doesn't have a job now. So I think that scares people away, but wherever he signs, he'll close. But yeah, you have to invest hard in a league with waivers or fab. You can fix it afterwards. So while I still think you want to leave the league with at least one guy you think has a job, I think you can relax a bit. This is a good argument to why you should be drafting earlier to the season this year. As soon as like the other half of the teams name their closers,
Right.
it'll get a little more relaxed. Because right now, I mean, San Diego and Seattle, they got like 7 guys each that might close for them. So yeah, you don't even know. I mean, it's unbelievable speculation. So yeah, I like to grab an early closer right now. I will pay the piper in the 4th or 5th, 6th round. I won't be taking one of the very, very top guys, but I want someone who gives me strikeouts and will lower my ratios a bit.
All right.
I'll
What
take
about guys? What about guys with dual eligibility? Any does that bump up for you at all this year after all the injuries the last few years that we've dealt with? The guys who are those flexible players, you can move to the second and short guys or the first base and outfield guys. How much
a lot
more
of them
premium
this
do you
year,
put on
too.
that? There's a lot of them this year.
Yeah, I love having the flexibility. I mean, Trey Turner at number 1, you get him. Not only do you get your second and short, Javier Polanco, second and short, Jake Cronenworth, you can kind of put everywhere. Yeah, I think it's really important, especially like you said with the injuries, to scoop up in as many of those guys as possible. So yeah, I do put a little bit of a bump on them, and unfortunately, it shows up in their draft price. Jake Cronenworth, for example, he's being drafted above his production head, like above his head as far as like
Right.
how good he actually is. But if you can move him to like second, third, first, whatever it is, that's great. I love Ryan McMahon as a second, third. Basically, there's so many people that not only dual eligibility, but they cross from middle infield to corner infield, which is fantastic because they cover like 4 positions in your lineup wherever you may have a need. So. Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to really keep that in mind because even though you may not want to play a player at a certain position, it gives you flexibility later in the draft where, oh man, I didn't realize second base dried up. Maybe you don't want to have to move someone to a certain position, but at least you're covered. So yes, absolutely.
You mentioned Polanco. That's another guy that I scooped up yesterday in the Raz Slam draft too. Because same thing, I was looking at the board. I was like, well, if I take Polanco, I can let the board come to me because I have that flexibility as the draft unfolds. Last one, really quick for me. Tell me this. Tell me when you are looking at the board this year, is there one position that you think is really, and not pitching, is there one position out there you're like, oh, I better have a plan for second base, for first base, whatever it might be, because you don't like the player pool this year?
To be honest, I don't like late second base.
Okay.
If I third base, everyone says is a cesspool, which it kind of is. But that's more from a safety standpoint. There's plenty of late guys later. I mean, there's Eugenio Suarez, Matt Chapman, Yon Moncada. There's
Brian Hayes has gone late in drafts too, where I think that's a pick worth taking.
Yeah, it's just question marks. So Josh Donaldson, when he's on the field, he's great. The bringer, I would say, he's not the bringer of rain, he's the bringer of calf tightness. But he will be good for you. You just got to be willing to have a backup plan. But that's okay. I think that Justin Turner is always available, so I'm okay taking some late guys. But second base, I want to get from that Lau, India, Polanco kind of area. That's where I want my second base from because after that, unless you've double tapped shortstop somehow, then you got to fill second base and then you got to fill the middle infield and you're kind of left with some middling players later. It dries up faster than you think. Same thing with, I always say with shortstop, everyone says it's so deep and I don't think it's deep. There's tons of great players, but I think people fail to realize most of those great players go like really early.
Right.
So it's like you don't get one. You're like, oh, there's plenty of other options. That's true, but you can't use the words "I can wait." You can't wait. They go. So all of a sudden you're sitting there, and then my last resort is Willie Adames and Dansby Swanson. That's the last group where I'm happy to start with, and then after that it kind of gets a little ugly. That's where you want to fill your middle infield spots. So as deep as middle infield is, the individual starting spots of shortstop and second base, I kind of like to fill my infield early.
Outstanding stuff from Matt Williams. Make sure you follow him on the Twitter machine at MattWI77IAMS. That's right, Matt Williams, but instead of L's, it's sevens. And check out all his work at NBC Sports Edge and The Athletic, also the host of the Turn 2 podcast. He's a busy man, and I got to tell you, Matt, we did a show a couple weeks ago, doing the show again. You're one of my favorite people, no lie. Keeping it real here. I'm the king of keeping it real to talk baseball with. I think you do a phenomenal job, and it's been great to see you rise in the industry these last few years. So again, I really appreciate you giving us the time here on Fantasy Pros. I think you're doing just a hell of a job, and I think it was great to chat with you today. And I think everyone is smarter for having hung out with you for this last hour, including me.
Keep going, saying nice things. Keep going.
That's it. That's all I got. That's it. No more.
All right, I have it recorded. I can play it back. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I think first time on Fantasy Pro show. This is a bucket list. Boom, got it checked off.
Not the last, buddy. Not the last. Also, I want to remind everybody, make sure you go over and check out the Draft Assistant with Sync. I'm telling you, if you want the pros in your draft with you, this is what you got to do. You got to go to fantasypros.com/draftwizard and upgrade to that MVP or Hall of Fame membership. That way, if you're drafting on Yahoo, ESPN, CBS, it doesn't matter where you're drafting. The draft assistant can be there with you, making suggestions, giving you insights to what's going on. If you want a real edge over your opponents in the draft, this is the way to get it with the Draft Assistant with Sync. It is a beautiful piece of technology, and it runs seamlessly in all of your drafts there for ESPN, CBS, Yahoo, and more. So make sure you go get that right now. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Matt Williams, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.